Hi, everyone. After spending last week's episode surveying basically everyone I know about this past Oscar season, it is finally time to look ahead to the next one. Today, I'm joining forces with my friends Joe Reid and Chris Feil of This Had Oscar Buzz to take a look at the Oscar year ahead and, as is our tradition, make some very irresponsible predictions in the process. It's our 2026 Oscar predictions episode. I'm Katey Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Joe and Chris, I talk to you guys about the Oscars all the time, but this is the first time the three of us together have done one of these predictions episodes.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. It's scary,
my knuckles.
Right? Yeah, I mean, Chris, Joe and I have been wrong on the record so many years in a row doing this previous Analytical Men.
This is true. Chris, you do not have the years of baggage that Katey and I have.
I look forward to being exactly right on the record. What can I say?
So before we get in, when we have this massive spreadsheet that Joe's put together, as is tradition, to try to look at what's coming, we're going to try to go through it in the least chaotic way possible because, as Joe just reminded me, nobody knows what these movies are yet. We barely know what they are, so we're going to try to confuse people as little as possible. But before we start, do you have any methodology? Do you have an approach to looking through this and look as unfoolish as possible a year from now? Joe, have you figured this out over the years?
Yes and no. I've developed a methodology, whether it's a methodology that works. That changes year to year. I tend to go studio by studio, and then I scour the sort of the usual spots, your Reddits, your Gold Derbies, your, whatever. And then I just go on a massive IMDb click from here to there about just this person hasn't had a movie in a while. What are they up to? What is this person up to? And then inevitably I fill in last minute holes, and it's very vibes based. I'm sorry. I sound very flighty and ephemeral about it, but it's just...
As are the Oscars.
But I do think it's that simple. 50% of the cartography of this is the talent involved, whether it's a star, whether it's a writer, whether it's a producing team, director, etc.
Sometimes it is if you're a Neon movie, if you're an A24 movie, obviously I'm going to have a little bit more of an eye on you. But also it's that were you a director of an indie movie that popped 4 years ago? I've got my eye on you. You know what I mean? Are you 2 movies removed from your big breakout?
Yep.
I've got my eye on you. That kind of a thing.
Yeah. So in theory, you can use that to think maybe Honora is going to be the one that gets Sean Baker through, but nothing is going to help you be I can confidently say in March that Honora will win Best Picture a year from now.
When we had this conversation last year, I didn't know Honora was coming out, and I don't think I knew The Brutalist was coming out. Those movies got on my radar after we did that record. Mm-hmm. Conclave was on the radar.
Yeah,
Wicked was on the radar, but I definitely didn't have any confidence in it.
I didn't either. I was struck. So we did this on Analytical Men last year, as we always had, and we were all so skeptical about Wicked. Everyone I think a trailer had come out that seemed very unpromising at that point.
Even the still images, everything looked junky. I was this is going to be a disaster.
People were very, very skeptical of splitting it into 2 movies until maybe right before the movie actually opened.
Yeah, more or less. Mm-hmm. I will say, just my bragging rights, that last year I did say, why not Conclave to predict Best Picture? And if you believe some people, I came very close to being correct. That's probably the best I've ever done.
Pretty good, because I remember looking at that movie and being maybe, you know what I mean? That's about as best as I could do with Conclave.
I mean, that's going to be the best we do for a lot of these.
Sure.
Do we also have to predict the movie that will become the meme spectacular of the coming
or the villain?
Oscar season?
Should we predict our Oscar villain?
Those ones I think are maybe easier to predict, because I probably could have predicted that Megalopolis would have been at least among those last year. So.
Well, and Joe, on that episode last year, you very briefly said, I'm tempted to predict Nosferatu, which actually would have been a great call on your part.
I have no memory of even thinking that, by the way, so that's amazing. Good for me.
So to dive into this year, before we get too deep in our methodology, maybe let's start with Wicked for good, because I was looking at this list trying to say, all right, who is around this season who's going to be right back at it? And that really is top of the list. I don't know how Cynthia and Ariana outdo themselves. I have no idea how you do that again, but they're going to try. Because we all learned our lesson on the original Wicked, should we go high on Wicked for good, or should the part 2 part of it make us feel skeptical?
Post-Dune Part 2, I don't know. Will those Oscars that Wicked Part 1 was successful in winning, will they even be nominated in that category?
I mean, if Ruth Carter won for both Black Panthers, relatively close together, I don't see why Paul Tazewell doesn't win for the costumes for Wicked twice. Because they're all going to be different, aren't they?
I think the fact that Wicked was not only just because, like, yes, Dune was a Best Picture nominee, as Wicked was, and got a lot of total nominations and a lot of wins. It didn't have anything in the acting categories. And I think that's maybe a little bit of an anchor for Wicked. The other thing is, and this was a theory that Katey, you had floated to us in the group chat recently, which was this idea that given the storyline in part 2, that you might see a category flip where...
Yeah, someone told me that. It may or may not have been on the air in last week's episode. So if it was, I'm sorry for repeating it. But yes, I love this theory too.
And I think in that regard, because Cynthia's character doesn't change as much as Ariana's character does. Like, Linda really sort of becomes a much more sort of mature and wary and wise person, and towards
she literally changes her name halfway through the movie.
She's disillusioned by the politics of it. She's sort of like, and I feel like if that then comes with the sort of the newness of a category flip where all of a sudden Ariana's in lead, I think that could do well for her. And then by that same token, Cynthia Erivo is a lead in a supporting category. You know what I mean?
As we know,
we've seen that work very well.
To do. Yeah. I mean, if we were not prepared for Ariana Grande Oscar nominee, are we prepared for Ariana Grande Best Actress winner? Like, is that a reality we can live with?
We're living in a lot of realities we were not prepared to be living
in simultaneous realities. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we know that Wicked for Good has the original song.
Yes. I think it has several.
But has it been confirmed that one of them is Ariana Grande's?
I don't know that much.
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
If they didn't each have one.
That Diane Warren wrote one of those original songs.
I mean, Joe, you're the one who has a Diane Warren spreadsheet going right now. Do you know what she's got coming out this year?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, there was word last year that she had that documentary about herself, and I don't think that ever actually came out. And there was supposed to be an original song in that, sung by Kesha. So
we're not ready for that.
I wasn't ready for it last year, and it got pushed. So I'm still not ready for it this year.
So I have this little list of, other contenders from this year who aren't going to be returning as the same roles, but different ones who we might be looking out for. I put at the top of the list Train Dreams. I think that's an obvious place to start. Also, it was really the breakout hit at Sundance, at a pretty paltry Sundance. So it's a movie that I've seen. Have you guys seen it?
Yes.
I can't remember. Okay.
Yes.
I did not see it.
It is a lovely movie. It is a strange fit for Netflix. I think we've said it's like, something that you would really like to see on the big screen, even though I watched it at home because it was virtual Sundance. But that's Clint Bentley and Greg Cuidar, the filmmaking team who made Sing Sing, and also Felicity Jones of The Brutalists. So that's a pretty powerful combo. I'm feeling bullish on Train Dreams, even though it's a pretty delicate movie, and we saw Sing Sing kind of get a little drowned out as a result of that. But I think everyone should have an eye on it.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned the sort of the paltriness of Sundance this year. I think because of that, I think Train Dreams maybe stands out from the crowd a little bit more. And we're coming off of what was, I thought, a pretty strong Sundance in 2024.
Yes,
so,
the real pain Sundance.
Yes. So I do feel like people are still sort of looking to be like, all right, now what out of Sundance do I need to pay attention to? And if it's just people pointing at this movie, then I think it's probably going to get a lot of eyeballs on it. I wish it wasn't Netflix, but, we live in the world that we live in.
Well, and Netflix is my concern for this movie. We're coming off of a season where Netflix had just a few movies that they were really pushing, and now this year, as I'm sure we'll get into...
It worked out great for them. Everything went fine, as according to plan with Netflix.
They certainly won Best Picture.
So, in the interest of sort of telling people what these movies are about. So this is Joel Edgerton and Felicity Jones.
Yes. Yeah. And it's set in the frontier in the 18... Actually, no. It feels like it's set longer ago than it is. Like, eventually, like, cars become part of the story. It's like turn of the century logging camp kind of world.
It's a Dennis Johnson adaptation. It really feels like a Dennis Johnson adaptation.
And it's really, like, lyrically done, kind of like, I mean, saying Terrence Malick also feels kind of like a scary thing to apply to any filmmaker, but it's got, like, nature and wheat and sunsets and stuff like that. I think Joel Edgerton's terrific in it. He's an actor I've always really liked, and he's not a returning favorite because he's never been nominated. So I would really love to see that happen.
That's cool.
Do you guys want to pick a returning champ or contender who you're looking out for this year?
Well, we're on a 2-year streak of Timothée Chalamet exceeding expectations in December, starting with Wonka, which I think had a lot of people sort of predicting awful, awful things, and it ended up being, at the very least, a financial winner.
How close did that come to sinking into Best Picture? Like, it paved the way for Wicked. I'll say that much. You never know.
Wonka for good. I will be here for it.
Wonka in Peru.
And then last year with A Complete Unknown, I do feel like it's going to like fade into the dustbin of history how certain everybody seemed to be that movie was going to be terrible. When we first got stills of it and we first got footage of it, that first trailer, everybody was dunking on that movie. And that movie really proved itself, and he proved himself. And so now we are going for December number 3 with Marty Supreme, which is the Josh Safdie movie about ping pong, starring
about a real ping pong player, like
about a ping pong
kind of
champion. And Chalamet is the lead. Gwyneth Paltrow is also in this movie. It is coming out in December, and I, who have historically never clicked with either of the Safdies, find myself strangely excited for this movie because it's Timothée Chalamet and Gwyneth Paltrow in a ping pong movie. Like, sold.
At Christmas.
At Christmas, exactly. Merry Christmas to me specifically. So,
do you want to, we should note that Josh Safdie also has his own movie coming out. So this year's breakup of the Safdie brothers is probably one of the stories we'll be following.
This is Marty Supreme is the Josh one, and Benny also has the one with The Rock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Benny. Yeah. Benny has The Smashing Machine with The Rock and Emily Blunt, the Jungle Cruise A24 reunion you all wanted.
The Rock and Emily Blunt, like cinema's new Bogey and Bacall, like it's, or whatever. Not real life romantically related, but like they love working together apparently. So yeah, good for them.
I went to Jungle Cruise Defender, shoot me, so I'm fine with all of that. Chris, how about you? What returning champ are you looking at?
I mean, maybe champ is not the right word, but we have yet another Luca Guadagnino movie coming this year in After the Hunt. I think one of the most exciting elements here is that it is Luca with Julia Roberts. We are always ready to see Julia Roberts back in a movie. This one follows basically college campus scandal and sexual harassment. The cast also includes Io Adebari and Andrew Garfield, so it's not just Julia Roberts to get excited for in a Luca movie. And when you give that log line to the movie, you think you kind of know what it is, sight unseen.
The log line is my big snag with that. I'm like, have so many projects have tried with that whole like campus sexual harassment, like gender politics, generational divide thing, and nothing has ever turned out less than cringy. And I'm worried.
Well, but also Luca Guadagnino's movies are never what their log line seems to be, right?
That's true. Like
Teenage Cannibals, Suspiria remake, William S. Burroughs adaptation, you know.
And generation gaps really well. Like if you give me the Michael Stuhlbarg speech and Call Me by Your Name and make a movie out of that, great. I'm there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect exactly what the log line promises from this movie. And, you know, Guadagnino is also one of those people who's never fully landed with the Academy in a way, but we always still will have the hope or the expectation that eventually it will. This is being released by Amazon MGM, a studio that has not had the greatest success in landing a lot of Oscar nominations for their films.
4 great Luca Guadagnino movies, for that matter. R.I.P. Challengers.
You feel free to say that as many times as possible. We will never let it go. But this is one that I'm ready to have these people back in the race.
Yeah. Joe, I want to give you, as the host of Demi, Myself, and I, a chance to talk about I Love Boosters, which is going to bring back Demi more. Like putting a Boots Riley movie in year ahead Oscar conversation does feel a little crazy. Because
you're really setting yourself up for failure there.
But also, I wouldn't have put The Substance on there. So what are the rules?
This is also a Neon movie, and Neon knows what they're doing. And the cast is fantastic. Keke Palmer, Lakeith Stanfield, Naomi Ackie, Demi Moore. I think it even goes beyond that. Those were just the first 4 names that I wrote down. It follows a group of shoplifters who take aim at a cutthroat fashion maven. As I was going through these movies, I sort of like jotted down little like unexpected thematic double features and stuff like that. And like, I was like, oh, we've got a couple of like targeting the CEO class movies, because like the Yorgos Lanthimos movie Begonia is also sort of about this.
The long shadow of Parasite just lings over all these movies.
Well, and Begonia seems to be specifically about like, that's the one where like they think the CEO is an alien, right? And I'm just like,
I believe
current events. But Boots Riley doing class conscious comedy is right up his alley.
Yeah.
And I'm...
The movie he made before, I always want to call Thank You for Smoking, but that's not what it's called.
Sorry to bother you.
Sorry to bother you. Okay.
But yeah, it sounds like Demi's got a supporting role in this. And maybe we talked about this, Katey, you and me and Nate Jones on my Demi podcast. I was very, very sort of down in the dumps after she lost the Oscar about like, man, when's she ever going to have this opportunity again? This at least seems like a really interesting movie, and hopefully the role is big enough that, she's able to do something with it. At the very least, it's a very interesting project, and it has her working with a lot of really exciting young talent, and I like that. So.
Before we leave behind the returning people, there's more of them, obviously, but I do feel like we have to talk about Brady Corbet and Mona Fastfold, because to be a filmmaker coming back already is pretty remarkable, and especially if you've made The Brutalist, which famously took 7 years to make. But Mona Fastfold, she was the co-writer on The Brutalist. She's the director of Ann Lee, which is a musical biopic of a real founder of a Shaker community.
The Shakers founder,
played by Amanda Seyfried, Dulcimer playing Amanda Seyfried. I'm getting my hopes up too high for this, maybe. I think it's going to be challenging, but Mona Fastfold did make The World to Come, a pandemic movie with Vanessa Kirby that wasn't Pieces of a Woman, that I thought was pretty good.
What is Brady Corbet's role in this movie?
I think he's the co-writer and probably also the producer, so they basically made it together.
As partners, they make both of their movies basically together.
Gotcha.
Kind of like Clint Bentley and Greg Quedar, where they just switch off who's directing, which is interesting.
Mona Fastfold's last movie, The World to Come, was a pandemic movie that I was a huge fan of.
Me too.
That also has another incredible Daniel Blumberg score.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and I think he did the score for this one also. He worked with them on the original songs for this movie, so...
Couldn't be more curious and excited about this movie. The idea of another Amanda Seyfried Oscar nomination might sustain me throughout the rest of the year.
Also, if I'm just calling out fun double features as we go along, a musical about the founder of the Shakers goes hand in hand with Sebastian Lelio's upcoming musical about a feminist activist in Chile. So
now Sebastian Lelio is a name that I know, but I can't remember why.
Sebastian Lelio did Gloria and then also its own remake, Gloria Bell. But he also directed A Fantastic Woman, which won the international feature in 2017, I want to say.
Yes.
So really, really exciting and interesting Chilean filmmaker. And that's one where I have my eye on, if that can go to Cannes. I know we just went through this whole thing with, odd musical succeeding at Cannes, and yet...
Yep. Are there any... So we've got those two, and then also Wicked for Good. Are there any other musicals you need to watch out for? Is that a theme of this year, or is that all we got for now?
I don't know if Song Sung Blue, the Craig Brewer adaptation of a documentary starring Hugh Jackman and Kate Hudson, is coming out this year or not.
Whoa.
But that sounds juicy.
Wow.
Interesting. Always up for an unusual musical.
Yeah. Okay, so another theme identified, because when you go through this list, you start seeing some of the same names over and over again. And so
you really start pulling the strings and connecting them on the wall.
Yeah, I did have this moment of being like, oh, everyone who was nominated for an Oscar in 2022 is back with their follow-up. I feel like Colin Farrell is he doing a Nicole Kidman thing where he just never stops working? Because he's going to be on this Emmy run for The Penguin. It seems like he's going to run away with that category. And then he has possibly 3 movies coming out this year, including Edward Berger's follow-up to Conclave, which is going to be on Netflix, Ballad of a Small Player, and then Big Bold Beautiful Journey with Margot Robbie. And then there's a third one I can't remember the details of, but that's still a lot.
He's supposed to do a movie with Andrew Hay, but I don't think it's begun filming yet.
Got it.
Interesting.
But yes,
I'm very interesting.
When the Colin Farrell Oscar nomination finally happened, it was great, but then we still want him to win. So
open those floodgates.
Yeah.
Yes.
The people who go from Emmys to Oscars and back and forth, it's happening more and more these days, it feels like. So I'm hoping for him too.
I'm just ready for a season where I get to hear him say the words "a big, bold, beautiful journey" as many times as possible.
That movie is interesting. So that movie is directed by Kogonada, who directed Columbus, but then also directed After Yang, which was, I thought, a really great Colin Farrell performance.
Great.
And then this one definitely seems to be pointed towards something a little bit more sort of broadly appealing. The log line is one of those very, very vague things. It says an imaginative tale of two strangers and the unbelievable journey that connects them. Which sounds
opposite Margot Robbie, if we haven't said yet.
Opposite Margot Robbie. It's a Sony movie, and it just had its release date moved from the spring to September 19th, which puts
promising.
It directly post the fall festivals. So it's definitely something now that I think has gotten people's antennas up. And if this is Kogonada sort of moving towards something a little bit more studio friendly, if he's working with Sony, that interests me. That an indie filmmaker leveling up while falling short of doing the now I'm going to go make a superhero movie. Yeah. If they can level up within a human realm, I'm really interested in that.
Well, and we've seen this story before of director who makes smaller movies. In the example of him, Columbus and After Yang, you watch that movie and it's oh, this is the sensibility of someone who one day could absolutely make a movie that wins him an Oscar.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point.
Also, After Yang begins with a dance sequence and an unbelievable journey that connects to imaginative strangers doesn't not sound like the kind of a movie that could have a dance break in it. And if I can see Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie breaking it down, I am into it.
Okay, speaking of maybe musicals, I've got my eye on Anne Hathaway because she's got Mother Mary, the David Lowery movie, which is going to have some music to it. So we talked about this last year, so we've been waiting on this movie for a while. I do feel like it's got to come this year finally.
And they took a long break, I guess, so that they could later film other sequences that might be performance sequences.
Ooh.
So I don't know, musical perhaps.
Because this it's her and Michaela Cole, and one of them's a fashion designer and one of them's a musician, but I don't remember which is which.
Anne Hathaway, I believe, is the musician, or we can interpret based off of Instagram posts, etc., that she's the musician.
Fantastic. I mean, I think we all love David Lowery here. He and Kogonada have made different movies, but does feel like someone who's been beloved by indie film people for a long time. And David Lowery made Pete's Dragon. Obviously, he's done the studio thing, but this just feels like a real huge opportunity for him.
David Lowery is one of those great filmmakers who does very good work in a lot of different types of movies, because you look at Anthem Body Saints to Pete's Dragon to Old Man and the Gun to Green Knight. And those are four incredibly different movies that have incredibly different sort of creative streaks going through them.
Yep.
And I'm so interested to see what he does with this, sort of pop star and fashion movie. Hunter Schafer's also in this movie. And after Cuckoo, I'm super, super high on Hunter Schafer.
You really are.
So I'm really, really excited for this movie.
I flagged her here because she's also in a Michael Showalter book adaptation called Verity with Dakota Johnson. I know I've heard of this book. Oh, Josh Hartnett also, speaking of people who had great years last year.
Hell yeah.
So I don't know if that's coming out this year. And then she's also in the James Gray movie, which I think we agreed is not coming out this year. So anyway,
it hasn't begun filming yet.
Anne Hathaway staying booked and busy is something I think we can all get behind. Anyone 100%. You guys are looking at who is going to be all over the place?
I feel like Josh O'Connor. Oh yeah, take it away.
There you go.
Take it away.
I mean, Josh O'Connor, he's in the massive ensemble for the next Benoit Blanc film, Wake Up Dead Man.
Incredible. What great casting.
A million avenues.
Isn't he playing a priest in that too? Don't we? Isn't that something that we know?
Based off set photos, we can believe he is playing a priest.
Or posing as a priest.
I was about to say, is he
or posing
as
a priest. Josh O'Connor posing as a priest. I mean, way to invade my dreams.
The current season
Ryan
of The Traders
Johnson.
UK has a real priest posing as a not priest, so I'm very
yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Wake Up Dead Man also has Glenn Close in a supporting role. I think we would be a little silly to not have that on our radar, though we've both Benoit Blanc films we've looked at to be well, where's the supporting acting nomination in this movie? I think this we would be silly to not take Glenn Close seriously.
Or Daniel Craig, for that matter. Daniel Craig came pretty close to that queer nomination, I think. And Benoit Blanc has become this really definitive character for him. I mean, it's a funny performance. Those are really hard. And Best Actor especially. But man, what a gift those movies have been.
Josh O'Connor also has two other really interesting projects that'll be coming from Mubi. One is The History of Sound, which puts him opposite Paul Mescal in what I'm guessing is supposed to be a queer romance. It's directed by Oliver Hermanus.
Queer World War I romance, I believe.
Right.
But it's set in Maine, so it's like a
interesting.
Stateside. Is it based on a book? It has real vibes of being based on a book. Oh, it's based on a short story written by Ben Shattuck, who is married to Jenny Slate. That is where this is all coming from.
But yes, I have heard Queer Love Story. My brain sort of turns off after that part.
Oliver Hermanus directed Living, which got Bill Nye a nomination recently,
movie.
And I thought was a better movie than it got credit for.
I just don't see how they can put Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor in a movie together and expect us to like hold it together.
In a romance,
like are you allowed?
Like, our heads are going to explode.
Pretty much.
And like I said, that's coming from Mubi. I think one of the other things we maybe didn't discuss enough last year was the success Mubi had with The Substance, and I'll be really
very
curious.
under-discussed with given what there was so much of that narrative was onto me, but like Mubi doing not only a really, really good awards campaign, but like that movie made so much more money than anything Mubi had done previous to that. Like they really, really leveled up in a way that's very exciting.
Yeah, an integral part to that movie's success here stateside. Also with Mubi, a movie that we maybe would have more Oscar question marks, but another filmmaker that we just feel like eventually it's going to happen, that's Kelly Reichardt and her movie The Mastermind, which has Josh O'Connor and John Magaro, the beloved John Magaro in it as well.
John Magaro, whose voice Robert Pattinson stole in Mickey 17, and nobody's talking about this.
Wow, that's so right. Oh my God, that's so right.
Give him his due.
Truly.
Well, Paul Mescal, we should say, is also going to have a big year in addition to History of Sound because he's got Hamnet, which is Chloe Zhao's follow-up to Nomad. Okay, it's her follow-up to Eternals, but like, come on, it's her follow-up. It's her follow-up to Nomadland. And he's in that with Jessie Buckley, who's also in Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride. There's and again, you're getting
he's playing Shakespeare in Hamnet of all things. So a
lot of like powers of the early 2020s Oscar races all coming together in that movie.
Exactly. Andrew Scott, too, speaking of Paul Mescal. Andrew Scott's in a bunch of movies this coming year as well. Because he's also in Wake Up Dead Man. He's in the Richard Linklater movie about Lorenz Hart. He's playing Richard Rogers, I believe.
And got a supporting performance award at Berlin.
So we're
Sony
taking
Classics
Berlin.
Has this movie.
We're taking the Berlin Acting Awards more seriously this year because they gave theirs to Sebastian Stan last year for A Different Man.
We just root for Andrew Scott under all
circumstances. And we root for Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne got the lead performance for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Okay.
Yeah. And then he's also in this movie called Pressure, where he plays... This is the one that's World War II based. Okay, so... He plays
a meteorologist.
This is the story I think about.
It's literally
he's the meteorologist
it's about the
who's
weather.
like why don't you do D-Day tomorrow and that'll work out. But it's a Focus Features movie. It's he's the lead in that one, co-starring with Brendan Fraser, Carrie Condon, Chris Messina, Damian Lewis.
Speaking of recent Oscar races.
It's from the director of Hotel Mumbai, which I remember thinking was a better movie than I thought it was going to be when I saw it back in 2018, but has not directed a film since then. What's his name? Anthony Morris is this guy's name. But I'm into it. I'm interested. I think Focus has an interesting little lineup this year because they've also got Begonia, which is the Yorgos Lanthimos movie, which I have heard from... sources that like they're really, really excited about that one.
I have heard that as well.
And then they've got the Ronan Day-Lewis movie Anemone, which, shocker, Daniel Day-Lewis did not stick to his vow to retire from acting. I'm so surprised.
Joe, you act like he's like hurting us by coming back to the screen.
About it, but
it's a gift.
It's my same attitude that I had about Soderbergh, which is I will be thrilled when you break this obviously breakable vow. Like, obviously, you're not going to stay away from acting. You're in the prime of your life. Come on now, man. But so Sean Bean is also in that movie. Samantha Morton. That's another Focus movie. So Chris and I...
Samantha Morton secretly having kind of a like she'll just be popping up everywhere.
We are in kind of a quasi-quiet golden age where like the Samantha Mortons and Emily Watsons of the world are like sneaking back into the picture, and I'm just like, let's go. All right, let's do it.
One of I wrote down some like themes for the studios in general, how they're contending, and I think I stole this from you, Joe, who pointed out to me that Focus Features has never won Best Picture, which is just a crazy
That's my thing.
thing.
That's
your
Chris's
thing, Chris.
That's my thing.
Like it's a crazy thing for a studio that's played such a huge role in like prestige.
Brokeback Mountain lost, and then they said thinner to the future, and then Focus has never won Best Picture ever
so
since.
Like I don't think Conclave was the best shot they're ever going to have. Like I don't know if Begonia is going to be the Yorgos movie that like really breaks in and wins Best Picture.
Holdovers into Conclave, like they're in a real good
strong
streak.
Run.
Yeah. So yep.
Okay, I have my studio notes, but I don't want to like spend too much time talking about studios. But I do just want to note that A24 has a billion movies that we're looking at right now. Are we worried about them doing? I mean, The Brutalist did very well. It won a lot of Oscars, so I think it worked out okay. But I do think some of their other titles maybe got swept away a bit. Are we worried about them doing the same thing again this year?
I don't know. They're doing, in just like the first 6 months of the year, they have so many movies that they're releasing more so than ever. And some of those do feel more like box office plays than, anything awards minded.
Which is such a funny thing to think about, a place like A24 where it's just a box office play.
Look, but they are kind of filling that void in the spring.
They're one of the few places that like knows how to make money with this size of a movie.
Yeah. Like Death of a Unicorn premiering at South by and coming out in April.
Right.
Like we don't Legend of Ochi. We do not need to worry about these as Oscar plays.
And to me, it's just a question mark of, okay, so these movies that look like they could be coming out in the fall, like Benny Safdie's movie, The Smashing Machine, how much is that going to actually be an Oscar play versus this might just be a cool movie meant for general audiences?
Yeah.
The ones that I have my eye on, I still am of the belief that Ari Aster eventually is going to break through. And his new movie, Eddington, which stars Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal and Emma Stone and Austin Butler, seems sort of genre-y. It's a couple stranded in a New Mexico town during the pandemic, but it takes a sinister turn.
I believe some of the leaked plot details are that this is kind of like a political satire as well.
Wouldn't surprise me considering it's being set during the pandemic.
Right.
I'm just interested in it. I don't think Ari Aster needs to pander to the Academy. I think in this current area of the Oscars, keep doing what you're doing, and I think eventually they will probably come around at some point. So I think that's what Sean Baker did. The Celine song movie Materialists with Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans is a romantic comedy of all things about a matchmaker. Like, hell fucking yeah. You know what I mean?
Supposedly the reference point for this movie, though, is broadcast news. So if we're getting Celine songs broadcast news,
And in the same year as maybe a new James L. Brooks movie and Ella McKay, like them were really eaten.
I would love to be optimistic about the James L. Brooks movie.
I've heard not, but that was only from somebody who like read the script. So who knows? We've talked about Mother Mary and we've talked about Marty Supreme. Those are two other A24 movies. We talked about If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You a little bit, which was another Sundance movie. Probably the other Sundance movie that people were like, this could have no pun intended, legs in award season.
And that's the one that Rose Byrne won for at Berlin. So,
right. Yeah, you could be looking at a Rose Byrne Best Actress nomination. And then A24 has a movie called The Death of Robin Hood starring Hugh Jackman that is sort of a late in life Robin Hood movie, like looking back on his life with regret or whatever. And
has that begun filming though?
I don't know if it's begun filming.
I think it's listed as in production on IMDb, whatever that is worth. So it might not happen this year, but
yes, and it's directed by Michael Sarnowski, who made A Quiet Place Day One, which is a movie I thought was way beter than it had any right to be.
I'm really, really high on Michael Sarnowski. So
same.
Yes. And then they're partnering with Apple on Highest to Lowest. And in the past, when that has happened, it's been sort of seen as an Apple movie. That was the case with The Tragedy of Macbeth, I believe, was an A24 Apple sort of co-pro. But those are the ones I'm sort of most interested in for the A24 of it all.
We should say Highest to Lowest is the Spike Lee movie. That's a remake of the Kurosawa movie High and Low with Denzel Washington. It is really
A$AP Rocky
exciting.
Seems to be the lead of that, at least going.
Denzel's not the lead?
Well, the only photo on IMDb is of A$AP Rocky, which makes me feel like he's being, front-loaded, but who knows?
Also, Ice Spice is in it. It's just like, one hit after another, basically.
Yes. Netflix is Netflix, but we should probably mention it just because they have their usual wagon load of films that they're bringing to the table, and we can all sort of wring our hands. But reliably, 2 or 3 of them really do jump into the race. And it's a matter of, I will be shocked if Noah Baumbach's Jay Kelly doesn't. This is a sort of family dramedy, I believe, is sort of, we're not really getting a ton of plot details.
International, co-written by Emily Mortimer.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Jay Kelly is Clooney, Sandler, Laura Dern, and a cast of thousands. But I believe those 3 are the featured ones. You've got Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which is, of course, you can talk about double featuring because Maggie Gyllenhaal has her Bride of Frankenstein movie.
Yep.
Super excited for both of those. Catherine Bigelow has her typically as yet untitled film. Catherine Bigelow and Paul Thomas Anderson will one day make a movie together, and it will never, ever, ever get a title.
It will never be told what it's called.
We'll never know what it's called.
It'll live, die, replete, Edge of Tomorrow, constantly have a changing title.
Her movie is a White House thriller about the missiles are coming kind of a thing, which is interesting. The Edward Berger movie that we've mentioned, The Woman in Cabin 10, which is someone got killed on a cruise, I believe, is the plot of The Woman in Cabin 10.
I want to have faith in that one, but it's giving real Girl in the Train, Woman in the Window vibes there, and I'm rooting for Keira Knightley and Guy Pearce. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, if we're living in a Benoit Blanc world, there's room for it.
All that means is that I'm just going to slot that on my list of we need this now movies. That's my new phrase, by the way. Is we need this now.
Now more than ever.
We need now. That goes on the same list as the John Carney movie about musicians. We need this now. You know what I mean? A new Benoit Blanc movie. Absolutely, we need this now. So, yes.
I was going to do a little bit on major studios, but honestly, the main movie I wanted to talk about coming from a major studio, I think could possibly dovetail into asking Chris about the Cannes lineup, which, as we all know, can be a huge stop for this. Because I'm looking at the August release date for the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that's got Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and I'm wondering if it might pull a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and show up at Cannes and then open later in the summer. Is that a realistic
hope? I'm sure Cannes would love to have that movie.
Do they have a history with Paul Thomas Anderson at all?
Not since Punch Drunk Love.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there also the open question mark of does Paul Thomas Anderson really want to be in a competitive film festival like Killers of the Flower Moon? He could always be out of competition there.
Was Once Upon a Time in competition?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
Premiering on the same day as Parasite.
Wow. What a year.
Warner Brothers has paid a lot of money for this movie, and considering some of the financial situation they find themselves in the movies that they paid a lot of money for this year, I think that brings some question mark to this release date, which might bring a question mark to it being at Cannes.
Well, and PTA tends to take his time with his movies anyway, right? This is why they often release at the very end of December.
And I think we will all be thrilled to see that movie whenever we see it.
Okay.
As far as other Cannes movies go, especially on the heels of my saying Cannes may not be quite the Oscar home anymore, the one I'm really, really curious about is Joachim Trier's follow-up to The Worst Person in the World.
Hell yeah.
Called Sentimental Value. Neon has this movie. He really feels like someone who could very easily fill up an Oscar slot, considering or graduate to Oscar beyond the nominations that last film got. There's also American performers in this movie, in addition to Renata Reinsve, Corey Michael Smith, and Elle Fanning, I believe. So you can imagine that a portion of this movie is going to be in English. Definitely anticipating that one. Also coming from Neon, quite possible for Cannes, is Julia Ducournau's Titan follow-up. I would imagine that, she would do a post-Palm victory lap there, and then we'll see if it's more Oscar-y than Titan was. But this is apparently set in the 80s and starring Tahar Rahim, who lost almost 50 pounds for this movie.
Oh, wow. God, I get so stressed out when people do that. Please take care of yourselves.
Who did not have 50 pounds to lose, by the way.
can look up the pictures. He showed up for some red carpet thing where he had lost the weight, and it's like, okay, here we go. Okay. And apparently this is AIDS factors into the narrative in some way. I trust Julia DeCurnau. I would understand someone not necessarily trusting how that's going to go.
It'll be interested to see if the Cannes committee and the sort of the French film community is as trusting as they were the last time.
Well, and I mean, Titan got being the movie that it is, got somewhat of a mixed response at Cannes, even though it left with the biggest prize.
Yeah.
Another film I think we can expect to see at Cannes, though maybe not in the Oscar race, considering what happened with Asteroid City, is The Phoenician Scheme, Wes Anderson's next movie. I think we were all kind of heartbroken to see that not really get an Oscar play. We'll see what happens with this one.
I don't trust these Philistines with Wes Anderson movies anymore. You don't appreciate shit.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But while you're talking about Americans, it sounds like the Richard Linklater movie that's set in France. That does seem like something.
He's doing a French New Wave movie. We'll get double Linklaters this year.
I love the years that we get double Linklaters. Those are always such fun years. We already have
double Soderberghs. Like, how lucky can we be?
Nouveau Vague is about the French New Wave. It stars Zoe Deutsch as Jean Seberg. That is
one
anticipated
of these years,
to be at Cannes.
A Seberg movie is gonna hit. Like, it's gonna happen.
So, hopefully. Chris, you were on the record saying that on the podcast saying you think that the Cannes bubble is going to burst. Joe, where are you on like how intensely we should be watching Cannes this year?
Well, now I realize I should have listened to that conversation because now I feel like I'm behind.
I mean, Chris, you can sum up the gist of your argument, but it's basically like these things work in waves. Like as soon as the Oscars get into something, that they change their mind. So I think it's a perfectly good argument. It's hard to know without knowing this year's lineup how likely that is to happen this year.
And as far as the actual prize winners are concerned at Cannes, there's been this string of English language films, or largely English language films, being the top prize winner. That's not always going to happen. There will be things that aren't going to play to the Academy's taste that win palms.
Yeah.
I would be thrilled to see something like Apichatpong Weerasethakul's like Uncle Boon Me be a Best Picture nominee based off of Cannes credibility. But, I think the Academy is kind of far from.
Well, the question we'll keep asking ourselves, maybe as we head toward the end and try to make our actual predictions about what's going to happen, is how weird can you be to be an Oscar movie? And that's, I feel like we're pushing that boundary even further.
I think that's going to be a roving question through, like, not only this year, but, like, forward.
And one of my Cannes questions that could also be, how weird could Oscar go, is a previously Oscar-nominated filmmaker, and that's Terrence Malick, who made a movie about Jesus that we will see someday.
We'll believe it when we
I will
see it.
believe that movie is happening when I am seated in front of it and the credits are rolling in front of me.
Indeed.
That is when I will believe it, and not a second sooner.
Before we start wrapping it up and make your predictions about what will win Best Picture, is there any one last thing that you want to make sure gets mentioned so that a year from now we don't have to feel embarrassed about ourselves?
I wanted to sort of read the temperature of the room. This King Lear movie that is happening with Al Pacino. How much of a movie is this? Like, how much is this movie going to end up existing? Because
remember when he made that movie with Jessica Chastain? Yeah, is that what the one?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is what I'm thinking. But also, it's like, at some point, we're getting into, like, the last Al Pacino Oscar nomination territory, right? And, like, maybe that, we've already seen it. Maybe that was The Irishman. But I do feel like there is hay to be made if Pacino gives one sort of last roar of a lion performance in a role like Lear. It's called Lear Rex. It is directed by Bernard Rose, who directed the original Candyman, which is a movie enough for anybody. I think it is. It's one of the more sort of creative takes on a horror movie in my lifetime. So I think leave it to him to maybe zhuzh up Shakespeare a little bit. So I'm interested.
Yeah.
Other performances, though, I can't imagine I'm going to have the guts to make this my Oscar pick. So I just want to say, Derek Cianfrance is back with a movie. It is called Roofman. It stars Channing Tatum.
Yeah, it does.
I could not be more excited. It is about a roofman.
What if there was a roofman?
What if there was
the correct,
a roofman?
Correct pronunciation is roofman.
Roofman?
Thank you.
It's about Stan Roofman. The story of a rooftop robber, yes, and his time on the lam evading capture, you betcha, starring Channing Tatum, but also Kirsten Dunst. It is a Derek Cianfrance movie, so of course it has Ben Mendelsohn, I imagine looking haggard. Peter Dinklage, Uzo Aduba, Juno Temple, Lakeith Stanfield. Chris and I are both on the record as being Place Beyond the Pines apologists.
Not even apologist. Good movie.
No, enthusiasts. Yes. So and then Chris went a step further and watched all of that incredibly depressing HBO series that he made and really loved that.
Oh, the one with Mark Ruffalo?
The one with Mark Ruffalo.
I know this much is true. Wally Lamb adaptation, incredible.
I could not imagine during pandemic subjecting myself to something that would make me feel that sad. But I believe you when you say it was really great. So I'm really excited for the return of Derek Cianfrance. This is a Paramount movie. Who knows? Who knows? Channing Tatum giving, the performance of a lifetime. Who the heck knows? It's an October release date as of right now. We'll see how that shakes out.
I also don't know if I'm gutsy enough to predict this, but I know that Ryan Coogler's Oscar moment is going to come, and Sinners, from where we are here, a few weeks away from its release, looks
so excited.
Incredible. Like Michael B. Jordan, another person whose Oscar moment is coming. I think the spring release dates should make us feel nervous, although the calendar keeps expanding. Like if you think of Anora having really opened in May at Cannes, I don't think it's a disqualifier, but I just want to mention it. I have really high hopes for it, and I would really like it if that was the studio movie that really made it through.
And it's about vampires? Yes.
Yeah, I think semi-secretly about vampires, but everyone seems to know it's about vampires.
The trailer does not seem to be hiding it all that much.
Yeah.
No.
But I'm super excited for that. I also wanted to just throw in a couple more performances because I do have... in the interest of just us not missing anything.
I know. We're going to miss something, though.
If Nia DaCosta's Hedda does release this year, I'm really interested to see what that means for Tessa Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy Allen White as Bruce Springsteen in the Scott Cooper Bruce Springsteen movie.
Yep.
Some of those ingredients sound very appealing to me, some of them less so. But after A Complete Unknown, I think we would be foolish to just sort of dismiss this out of hand.
Yep.
For as much as people have had complicated reactions to The Bear over the last, say, year or two, I think Jeremy Allen White's a tremendously talented performer.
As much as people tend to keep Scott Cooper movies at arm's length, I think Scott Cooper is a really interesting person to be doing a musical biopic.
Yep. Chris, anything you want to make sure and shout out before we wrap it up?
I forget if we talked about Lynn Ramsey's Die My Love, probably coming to Cannes, starring Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence has talked for years about wanting to work with Lynn Ramsey. This is probably my most anticipated movie of the year. Whether or not that means anything for Oscar is another story entirely. I also think, Katey, you and I will be on the same wavelength. We cannot underestimate James Cameron, and Avatar Fire and Ash
Thank you. I was going to feel bad if I didn't mention it.
We will have Fire Navi this year. I for one cannot wait for Avatar 3.
I would not predict it to win Best Picture, but I think it will get a Best Picture nomination. That's just what it's gonna do, and 4 or 5 others in addition to it. I'm seated for that.
As far as performances go, I believe I texted you both this on the Oscar ceremony, and it clicked in my brain that the Oscars might finally be ready to recognize the Sandman. And all I'm saying is that seems like maybe Uncut Gems, they weren't ready to do it. But Adam Sandler in a supporting role in a Noah Baumbach movie.
It's very possible. He's already done really good with Noah Baumbach before, because you know how much I like him in the Meyerowitz stories.
We love Meyerowitz. He's amazing in Meyerowitz stories.
Yep. I also will say, I have not been on the Edgar Wright tip for a while. It's been a minute since Shaun of the Dead, but I do wonder if The Running Man is maybe the flavor that I'm looking for with Edgar Wright, with something sort of, dystopian and genre-y and sort of zhuzhing up, a Schwarzenegger, Stephen King remake kind of a thing, I could be into that.
Speaking of people whose Oscar moment is coming, Glenn Powell, star of that movie. I see it happening.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to cut us off. We have all the rest of this year to talk amongst ourselves and probably back on this podcast about all these movies that are coming. So, time to put your money where your mouth is. What do you think is going to win Best Picture a year-ish from now? Anybody feel good about their call?
My joke answer is James Vanderbilt's 3.5-hour Nuremberg movie.
I think that might be my real answer. I'm so glad you brought it up. Because,
as I said in our group text, we could be having Nuremberg on the mind.
It's time for some more Nurembergs. For some
time to bring some Nuremberg back into
accountability in this world. It seems to have finished production last year. There's no reason I think it's not.
Russell Crowe, right? Russell Crowe, Michael Shannon.
Malek, Michael Shannon, Richard E. Grant. Don't tell me you don't want to see Richard E. Grant. Why is that a joke answer?
Just because I feel like 3.5 hours of, I don't know. I don't know why that. I'm very fully in support of you choosing that for you.
I'm sitting here being very defensively. Joe, why are you not taking my Nuremberg film
that I made? It's mostly because I wanted to double dip and talk about two movies, because my pick is, I'm just going to play it safe. Paul Thomas Anderson's been nominated 11 times. It's going to happen for him at some point. This movie, which we think is based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, but of course, as with every PTA movie, we don't know the title. He's being cagey about the plot and the inspiration, but we do know that it's Leonardo DiCaprio, it's Regina Hall, it's who else is in this movie? Benicio del Toro,
Sean Penn,
Alana Haim, of course, Tiana Taylor, and even if it's sort of vaguely sort of an offshoot of like a Pynchon type thing, the novel, now I can't remember the novel that it's supposed to be based on, but it is
Vineland.
Right. So the plot of that is sort of about counterculture revolutionaries in the sort of 60s and 70s and how that has met the modern era in some sort of thematic way. And I trust Paul Thomas Anderson to tell a story that does not sort of hit the politics nail on the head directly, but really makes it, incredibly clear what we're talking about. And I just think it's going to happen for him at some point. Yep. And this seems to be a really solid lane for him. And of course, the Oscars love DiCaprio. I think that team up is going to be worth paying attention to. And I think Chris is right that that release date is currently in August. Even if it stays there, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood thing shows that a movie can open at that time of year and succeed at the Oscars. But I also would not be at all surprised if this moves to December. So
yeah. I think the fact that it's a studio movie also, Warner Brothers lost some money on Joker 2, Mickey 17, but they're also backing this to a huge price tag, as you said. And, the power of a studio making a comeback in the Oscar race, I think Oppenheimer proved that's a really strong narrative. I'm going to stick with Nuremberg. I'm not making it a joke answer. I think, why not? I'm ready to do some Nurembergs again. I don't know when we'll see this movie. I guess maybe it'll be sold at Cannes. Who knows? But Chris, on to you. You get the last word.
Okay, maybe this is a little crazy, but it's a movie I feel like we need to mention, and I don't think we've mentioned it at all. I'm going to go with Darren Aronofsky's Caught Stealing.
Ooh,
interesting. I love this call.
It's the release date is planned for late August. Of course, that could change too. Yeah. But then again, we could be looking at the Crow remake, because that's when that was released last year. Austin Butler in what sounds kind of like a grungy, Uncut Gems-y vibe, New York City bars, etc. Austin Butler, of course, very excited to see when he's going to be back in the Oscar fold again. I'm someone who loved The Bike Riders, loved him in The Bike Riders. And Darren Aronofsky, I'm ready to forgive you for The Whale.
Me too. Come back to the fold, Darren. Come back. We love Mother so much.
I'm an Aronofsky apologist, but I do also just kind of wonder if maybe this could be the movie that brings him back to Oscar.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I honestly know that we're all sitting here thinking of the movies we didn't mention, and this time next year we'll be saying, "Oh, Jesus Christ, we didn't even know it existed." And it's a long list.
We didn't talk about the Bradley Cooper movie that may or may not release this year. I'm just saying there could be stuff. There could be stuff. Yeah,
we'll try to go easy on ourselves. We did our best, but I'm so glad we get to. Isn't that such a great way to like wrap up one Oscar season? Is to kind of look at all of this, have the titles rattle around in your head while you watch all your Emmy contending shows, and then come the end of May.
I want to dive into these titles like Scrooge McDuck into a giant vat of coins. Like, that's what I want to do.
I think I need an Oscar season break before I'm ready for the PTA. Like, I think the black bag level spring releases is what I'm ready for.
Oh, well, obviously, Black Bag is winning Best Picture.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
We are Black Bag killed here.
Yeah.
Incredible
honestly,
film.
Do you like the Soderbergh double nominations again for Presence and Black Bag? Like, not worth it. Joe and Chris, this is very fun. Obviously, you'll both be back on the show very soon.
Thank you for having us.
That does it for today's episode. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-hosts, This Had Oscar Buzz's Joe Reid and Chris Feil. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, I'll be back kicking off Emmy season at last. We'll see you then.